All right, so let's go ahead. Now, the first part we're going to put on the board are resistors. And reading it left to right, we got yellow, purple, red. So we know yellow is 4, and then 7, and then red is how many zeros are following the 4 and the 7. So the red is 2, so it's 4700 or 4700, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Or 4.7K, which is how it's noted on the board. Now, K stands for kiloohms. It's engineering notation. Do you see that? So we should have 2 of those, and they go right there. So this one is brown, black, and red. So brown is 1, black is 0, and red is 2. So that's 1, 0, and then 0, 0 because it's 2. So it's 2 more zeros. So that's 1,000 or 1K. So one goes there, and there's another one that goes right here. See that? All right, so then we have one more resistor, but I can guess what it is because there's only one left on the board. But we're going to see if we can derive the actual measurement. So it's brown, black, yellow. So let's look at our card. Brown is 1, black is 0, and yellow is 4. So that's going to be 1, 0, then 4 zeros. So that's 100,000 or 100K. So I'm going to put that in the board. And there you go. So that's all the resistors. Let's go ahead and flip. Well, before we flip, we're going to hold it on its side. We're going to just bend the leads over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on this side, and I'm going to heat up the component lead. I'm going to put a little bit of solder on my tip, just a little bit. I'm going to heat up the component lead, and then I'm going to try to make it to where the component lead, the metal coming off the component, melts the solder. I don't want the iron, if I can help it, I want to try to fix it to where the iron doesn't melt the solder itself. Does that make sense? I want the actual component to melt the solder, because then that's going to give me a much better connection. So I'm going to go take my cutters, and I'm not cutting it direct as close to the board as I can. I'm leaving a little bit of room.
Mm-hmm.
If you do cut it directly on the board, you're going to give it a weak solder point, and you might actually scratch the board. There's all my resistors. All my resistors are done. So now we're going to do the next lowest component, the smallest, and that's going to be our capacitors. These capacitors are really good to minimize noise in your circuit. So if you have like noise on your power or external noise for fluorescent lights produce noise, for example, these will help reduce the effects of that noise on your circuit.
Gotcha.
So that's what they're used for a lot. 0.1 microfarad and 0.01 microfarad are the most common capacitors in electronics, period. And that's what they're used for. So the next part I'm going to do is the socket. So the reason we use sockets is we don't want to apply heat directly to our integrated circuits like this. You probably can, and it'll probably work just fine. It's just a best practice to use a socket. So we're going to use the socket. And you see right here, let me zoom down. Right there. See here, there's a little indentation on the side of the socket right there. You see that? There's also a marking on the board. See that? It's important that they match. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to solder one pin in a corner like that. And then I'm going to check my socket to make sure that it's flat against the board. So it is flat against the board, so we're good there. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do the rest of the pins. Next, I'm going to put on my microphone. So my leads are a little bent up. I'm going to fix that. And I'm going to push them through these holes. Now this is a good example of how the silk screen on the board shows you how to build it. See how the holes are off center? They're not in the center of the microphone circle. So I'll put it in backwards. You see how it doesn't line up? Like it looks wrong.
Yeah.
But if I flip it around, It's perfect. So let's heat up the lead, apply the solder. Oh, that's a lot better. So I got the microphone on there. I'm going to put on my capacitors, but we have two different kinds of capacitors. Oh no. How do I know which one's which? Well, if you look, let me zoom in. If you look down on the capacitor, there's a measurement on it. If we can find it, where to put it? There it is. See that? 220, and then there's a little, what it is? It's a Greek symbol, mu. Some people call it a U, and then an F. So that's 220 microfarad. And you see how one lead is longer than the other? On the board, there's a positive and a negative side. See that?
I see that.
So I'm going to put it in with the long lead going to the positive side. Just like that. And then the same thing with the other capacitor. And I'm going to bend the leads back. Because again, I want that good mechanical connection before I solder, right? So I'm going to go ahead again. So now I'm going to turn my board. Remember, I want to solder up and down, not left and right, because I don't want to move my hand. So let's go ahead and clip this. You see, actually, I have another solder bridge right there. I didn't even notice that one earlier. So I'm just going to clean my tip, get my tip nice and clean, and I'm going to heat it up. There, oh wait. There you go. Just cleaner. I might actually have too much solder on that. So what do I do when I have too much solder? I'll use my wicking braid. Perfect. So the next parts I want to put on is probably going to be the LED right there. Now LEDs, just like those capacitors earlier, have two different size leads. One's longer than the other. Do you remember which one was longer for the capacitors? Was it a positive or the negative? Do you remember, Matthew?
The positive, I believe. Correct?
That's right. Exactly. So we're going to put the positive through the hole marked plus. Also on this board, you see there's two lines. There's a short line and a long line. See that? So
yeah,
that's to help even more. So we don't, because if you put it in backwards, you're going to have trouble. Next, I'll do the next lowest part, which will be my battery holder. So I'll put that on there. And this is another example of, let me zoom back out. Example of how the board teaches you how to put it on there. See, there's a shape on it. If I put it on there backwards, you can see it doesn't look right. Next, I'm going to put on the buttons. You see there's two buttons. One of them's for record. You press the button and it records your voice. And the other button's to play the voice. So with the buttons, I'm going to take my fingernail and I'm just going to try to bend the leads down to hold them in place. Because these buttons will go on crooked. I'm going to do just one pin on each button. Just a corner. And then we'll see if they're on straight. That's good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put solder in all the little holes. And there you go. And it looks like we only have one part left, and that's the speaker. So the speakers have a direction. See, there's a plus sign on it. And on the back of the speaker, there's a negative and a plus sign. And I'm going to clip them. Now I'm going to take, I'm finished. And I'm going to just check all the soldering points. I'm just looking over. I'm checking for bridges. I'm checking to see if there's gaps in the solder. Make sure everything is clean, at least looks clean. So here I have some isopropyl alcohol and a cleaning brush. An old toothbrush will work just fine too. A new toothbrush will work better. But so I'm going to pour just a little bit alcohol on it.
So quick question.
Yeah, sure.
this the same kind of rosin one would use for like a violin bow, or?
I don't believe so. I just know they call it rosin. It's a special chemical that's used for soldering. So now I'm going to take my tweezers and I'm going to straighten my pins out. The pins on this IC are a little bent. When we ship them, we put them in foam so they don't get bent. But guess what? This one got bent. So I'm going to take this IC, and you see how there's a dot? There's a dot right there, and then there's also that same indention. So Mark says that it may be the same rosin that's on violin bows.
That would make sense.
So you see there's an indention there. That's where the indention matters that we used on the socket. So the indention on the IC should also line up with the socket. So I'm going to put it in there. I want to make sure that all the pins are in the socket before I push it down. So I'm checking to make sure before I push it into the socket all the way, make sure all the pins are lined up where I want them to be. Because once you push it in, it's kind of hard to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and push it in. So there's my finished board. So let's test it. Come here, Watson. I need you. So let's hope it works. So I'm going to hit play.
Come here, Watson. I need you.
How cool is that?
That's awesome.
I need you.
That is very
Come here,
cool.
Watson. I need you.
And I tried to shape it like a phone so you can hold it, you got your microphone right there and you got your speaker. I don't know. It's a toy.
That's very cool, though.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Hey, Chris, it works.
Yay!
So, so there you go.